Welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions, the show in which three music nerds launch music into each other's ear holes, process it, and have it come spilling out of our mouths.
You've used that analogy like 50 different times in the past.
I kind of like that one.
It's slightly different each time.
I hate it.
It's like slightly different each time. I'm June Lindberg, here with Brian Courtney.
Hey.
And Chaz Jenkins.
I am definitively the best person in this show.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say in general. Like the best.
A reason why will be revealed.
Today's episode, oh Jesus Christ. Today's episode is a themed one. It's Overhated records. So maybe not albums that are classics or that are deserving of heaps and heaps of praise, but albums that by the general music nerd population.
The consensus.
The consensus is very negative. So we've chosen albums where the consensus is very negative, but we don't think that it deserves to be so low. And I'll kick things off with pretty much the poster child for this particular theme. The very infamous Philosophy of the World by the Shaggs. This record is, like I said, infamous.
Where do you start with this one? This is one of the albums.
Yeah. In fact, it's so infamous that there is a solid fan base and a cult following for it. Overall, though, it still shows up quite often on people's
worst album
lists of worst album of all time. Publications will say, we'll put it up there with just some of the worst of the worst of the worst. So what we really have here
is if the Raincoats sucked.
It's 60s beat music, essentially, performed by three, teenage girls who had absolutely no musical skill whatsoever. In fact, I believe I didn't actually research the origin story. I know, Chaz, you're a little bit more knowledgeable.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, private eyes.
Oh, I cannot wait to tell this story.
Right? They hadn't even heard, pop music.
Not even that. They probably heard some music. They didn't know how to play anything. No musical knowledge whatsoever. So...
And this album's recorded after they practiced.
So, before we get into it, let's talk about the backstory to give some major context here. Some of this, don't quote me correctly, I'm just kind of giving the basis of the story. Austin Wiggins Jr., father of three daughters, gets a premonition from a psychic that he will be the father of a famous band. His daughters will form a band and become famous.
Psychic says, specifically, you have three daughters and they will be famous.
Yeah, he has three daughters, and when they're of age, he drops them out of school, buys all the instruments, buys studio time, basically produces it himself.
Uses a majority of his savings for this.
Yeah, and basically forces his daughters to make an album. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, the vision only went so far, but ironically enough,
he's not an instrumentalist himself.
No,
he would just, according to what's been told, he would just send them to the basement, and just say, "Go rehearse."
Write shit, yeah. This album is technically a strong cult classic, so honestly, maybe that gypsy was right. But what gives this album some street cred is that not only did Kurt Cobain list this as some of his favorite albums of all time, but so did Frank Zappa. Which, on the surface, you would take with a grain of salt, because Frank is a weird dude. But Frank's got the musical chops. So for him to point at this and say, yeah, this is one that you got to look at.
If you were just a fan of his music and didn't really read his book or listen to interviews about it would blow you away the type of shit Zappa because he basically liked music that was completely insufferable to anyone but him. Which I think he is pretty much says is the case in his book. He's no one likes it.
On the surface, is this album good? No. They have no musical talent. It's actually produced pretty decently. That's the most surprising thing for me personally, is that the production on this thing is kind of good.
They were in a studio,
Yeah.
It's studio produced, right? So it's not super lo-fi or anything.
They don't know what they're doing at all. But it goes farther than that, because let me talk about what happened after this album was released. Years later, It's obviously garnered a huge cult following. Dot Wiggins, one of the members, is still playing music to this day with her band, the Dot Wiggins Band, who, funny enough, a fun fact, is on the studio record label Alternative Tentacles, who not only produce music for the Evaporators, but Dog-Faced Hermans.
Yep, on the vinyl I have, it's Alternative Tentacles.
They produced, there's a lot of good stuff that came out.
But what's crazy is that years down the line, the band reformed, the Shaggs came together. This music
they still play these songs.
Exactly how they recorded them. They have transcribed the drumming, guitar playing, vocals. It's all on sheet music, and they played it live.
So the psychic was right.
It's crazy. So that's where the
3 daughters became superstars.
That's where the line gets blurred for me. It's like, did they do this on purpose? Like, when they wrote this music?
Not at the time.
Probably.
Not at the time.
But if they know exactly how to play this music, I don't know.
They rehearsed it. They rehearsed it religiously. But, they don't know what they're doing, so it's just this, like...
The way they learned it is how they play it.
It's like, if you rehearse a song over and over again, but you don't know how to sing, of course you can sing the song every time. It's just going to sound terrible. And that's basically what happened, is they just played a terrible song over and over again until they
But what's impressive is that there's drummers with high caliber who cannot play the drumming on this album. It's that just kooky.
It's too random. And they basically trout mask themselves a little bit here, where they just rehearsed it so much that it makes sense to it's just muscle memory.
Exactly.
They have no idea. To replicate it is a task.
9 times out of 10, the music on here is pretty awful. But what gets me, what I love is the lyrics on this thing.
Such a perfect statement. 9 times out of 10, this thing is just a chore.
Like, looking at the track rating, I have a couple actual tracks that I actually really enjoy. Who Are Parents?
There's one good song.
Who Are Parents?
Bad. That's one of the worst ones.
I'll tell you why I think that's a good one, Brian. I'll tell you why I think it's a good one. But Who Are Parents? My Pal Foot Foot, classic song.
That was a single, by the way. That was a single. My Pal Foot Foot.
Who Are Parents? My Pal Foot Foot, Sweet Thing, and Why Do I Feel? I actually kind of like those songs. Brian, the reason Who Are Parents is actually a pretty decent song is because, like I said, lyrically across the board, I love this thing. Every song lyrically I love. Because they're so genuine, they're so heartfelt. It's just so cute and fun. But Who Are Parents? It's low-key kind of sad. Like, kind of depressingly sad. Because it's like, they're probably very upset with their father for making them do this shit. He dropped them out of school. He basically took them out of their social lives to force them to make this fucking album. So they're probably like... Yep. Yeah, we're going to write a song how we secretly do not like our parents.
The reason why the backstory doesn't ruin it for me is because they're still playing them nowadays. So you know that they weren't like traumatized by this experience. This wasn't on the level of like Captain Beefheart locking a band in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
This is not at that level.
No, right.
This is just an overzealous father.
Now, there are some songs...
I mean, it was dumb.
There are some songs
dumb move.
fucking cannot stand. My Companion, honestly horrible. Like, probably the worst song on here is My Companion.
Honestly horrible.
I do love the twist, though, that it's the radio. Never would have called that on first listen. That it's a song about a radio. But those chords are just fucking atrocious. Like, I could play, like... And I'm going to cover My Companion right now. That's exactly how it fucking sounds.
That's not inaccurate to the kind of chords that are played on the
It's just awful. Because the other times there's some... But there's some times where the guitar line, it's like, okay, it's just a problem that it's so dissonant. Is that it's...
You can't talk about bad songs on this thing without talking about It's Halloween. That might be the worst song I think I've ever heard.
Dude, the lyrics on that?
It's kind of amazing, though.
Dude, the lyrics
how
on that
bad
thing?
It is.
Dude, the lyrics on that thing bring me so much joy.
It's so bad it's good again, but it's really awful. It's like, it goes on. It's the shortest song here. And
I hate We Have a Savior
way too long.
because I deadass know the girls did not write that shit. That's probably a Austin Wiggins original. We Have a Savior. Fucking hate that shit.
I'd have been religious. I feel like if you grew up in the 60s and you were
I know,
Well,
but
they're probably not
I
even thinking
didn't.
about it.
I
when they wrote
didn't.
it. What about Why Do I Feel is actually good.
I love that song.
Why
that
do I
song's-
feel? What a question.
It's awesome.
Don't laugh. There's a good song.
The lyrics on Philosophy of the World, while kind of Dr. Seuss level of basic rhyming, is kind of awesome.
No, it's a little bit below that.
I just love the fat people want what the skinny people got. Skinny people want what the fat people got. It's like, yeah.
To be honest, that's not even that ridiculous of a lyric. Like,
Exactly. Or the
but-
rich people want what the poor people got, but the poor people want what the rich people got. Kind
like,
of
obviously it's
bars.
super basic, but it's kind of like, you know.
That's a heavy bar.
It's not, well, no, not exactly, really. I don't know.
Well,
It's,
calm down there, Chaz.
the lyrics they're endearing, but
Like,
it doesn't
that's-
save the
yeah,
fact
that's like a lyric
they're
that could
being
get-
sung terribly.
That's like a good yearbook quote, you know?
No, it's not.
Charles Jenkins, the rich people want what the poor people got.
Yeah.
Poor people want what
If you
the
had to choose a Shaggs yearbook quote, it has to be like
my pal Foot. He roams.
something from My Pal Foot, or
Yeah.
just like a sweet thing, or something like.
Like I said, like there's some
Why do I feel?
what saves
Even
this
Dracula's
album.
gonna be there.
What saves
you
this
know,
album.
why are you laughing so hard at Why Do I Feel? Why is that so funny?
Because it's
to you?
such a funny question.
But here's the thing.
No,
Why do I
it isn't.
feel?
That's a real
What
question.
saves this record, to get back in the seriousness, what saves this record is its
I don't
genuineness.
know if you could save it.
What saves it is its genuineness. That's like what would make me want to come back to this, is how genuine it is. And just the experience, like the drum solo at the beginning of My Pal Foot is honestly amazing. It's like honestly amazing. I couldn't even begin to try and recreate that on my own, like my own version of that. It's truly special. And it was recorded, thank God. But like I said, there's some songs in here that I do hate, that I just cannot stand. And My Companion is probably the one. Like, that's the one that offends me the most. I hate the guitar playing.
Dude, how the fuck have you not bitched about It's Halloween yet? That song
I
is
love that
fucking
song.
awful.
I love
No.
Dracula will be there. It's like, fuck yeah, he will.
That's the best part because there's like a beat drop and then the drums are completely out of sync. Like whatever groove they were riding at the beginning was totally fine, and then it's like even Dracula's gonna be there. After that, total dissonance. Just total fucking dissonance.
I don't like that little sports car either. That one kind of annoys me. That's just such a weak moment. But it's saved. The 1-2 punch of Who Are Parents into My Pal Foot is the best moment on the record.
A lot to take in, yeah.
Yeah. Seriously though, this is if Raincoats had no idea what the fuck they're doing.
And also didn't know how
But
to
what's
write songs and
ironic-
play instruments.
What's ironic is
and
that
also
the
we're like
production.
13.
What's ironic is that the production here is much better than the Raincoats self-titled.
That's because it was recorded in a studio. Because their dad spent all of his money trying to do this because he believes some gypsy, dude. And like,
As you do.
you know, he probably gave her $20 and she was like, "I'll just say fucking whatever." And then he went off and did this, and somewhere she was like, probably should have charged a little more.
She was right. She was completely
Crazy.
right.
This
That
is-
goes to show psychics are real.
No.
That's exactly. It's a pretty
Pseudoscience,
This is
best
proof.
science. Pseudoscience,
I think-
best science.
I like pseudoscience. I don't think this is the worst thing ever made.
It
It's
does not
bad.
deserve that.
It's pretty bad.
We've literally heard worst shit from all three of us
Yeah.
on our opinions. We've heard worse shit than this by default.
Make no bones about it. Like, this is pretty terrible. But like,
No. Okay. Do you want me to give my opinion about this record? This is a good ass record. This is a good album. This right here is a fucking good album.
I don't go to the extent that June
Do you want to know
feels.
why?
June also
Okay.
believes that the psychic, it's just
June just said she
Okay.
did agree with psychics. Yeah, so just remember that.
everybody take this with a grain of salt.
Here's why. Okay, I was joking, you piece of shit. But here's why
I hope you're
the
joking
Shaggs
now.
are good. And I'm not joking now. I was joking about the psychic. I'm not
Okay,
joking about the
alright.
Shaggs. Okay? So this is the origin of June Core, right?
They say
So,
gay a lot,
June Core.
and obviously they meant a different context there.
Oh yeah,
but
I meant
they
to
say,
bring that up. I was like, I was
say
like,
gay
it's
a
got
lot.
all the
One thing's
markings.
lacking. It's lacking the gay, but I think when you think of June Core, you think of very ramshackle, very strange, authentic, just girls making noise, strange noises, maybe some like herky-jerky sort of rhythms going on.
Bring it back around.
Right.
Right.
So if you add, like as Brian said, as I've been saying all week, you add musical competency and the ability to write songs to the Shaggs formula, and you get the Raincoats. Like that's what, and I adore the Raincoat. So that shows you why I like the Shaggs right there.
The
Because
Shaggs came first. That's what's crazy, is that the Shaggs came first. That's what's really crazy about
yeah. That's why the Shaggs, I think, were actually genuinely important contextually and like actually influential, because they were so DIY.
They were sitting in the basement.
In the recording process.
They were sitting in the basement, like, our fucking dad. Like, do we really have to do this? We have to, because June Limburg's going to be born in the next 3 decades, so we got to write this music for her.
I don't think it's an avant-garde masterpiece or anything, the way that some people go as far as saying.
I mean,
like, this thing is not like a secret, like, it doesn't take apart the building blocks of music and put them back together the way that Trout Mask does.
I think of like the Seats This Heat, where it's like trying to do something new with me. It's not pushing music forward. It's literally just inexperienced.
I mean, the thing is, as low-key as punk this is, I think I just like the backstory more than I like the album. And I think that's the biggest issue.
The thing about this record, if you put it on, I got a smile on my face from start to finish. 30 minutes of feeling good. And that is the whole point.
Yeah.
Right? I've said before that emotion is the biggest thing in music for me.
There's some emotion.
And this album just gives me a goofy smile on my face because it's a bunch of goofy-ass music. But it's just ridiculous. And you can hear shades of the Shaggs in a lot of indie music of the late 70s and 80s and 90s, just that kind of amateurish vibe. It has it's amateurish to an absolute extreme that I don't think has ever been reached again, unless you find an album that was made by like a 3-year-old, which I believe exists. So that's just an aesthetic that I adore. And the fact that it's just so wide-eyed and naive just adds to the charm, I think. Yeah, I really enjoy this, actually. There's not a song on here I dislike. And the thing is, the dissonance and the atonality of the instrumentation and how nothing is working together kind of gives it its own little unique charm. Obviously, it's not like, it's almost amelodic, but it does have its own vibe because of that, and you're going to be hard-pressed to find other stuff that sounds like this. It ends up sounding fairly unique, not by design, but that's just how it sounds. I think it sounds fun. I don't know if I would go so far as to say, like, really good. It doesn't, like, flow well.
It doesn't. That's the thing, it doesn't.
Fun.
But
it's just got a fun vibe.
I agree with the influence thing, because, you know, it is so, it's like, hey, literally anyone can do this. You know, it kind of does have that ethos about it. Like, yeah, literally anyone can make music and release it. Here it is, you know. It's like, to bring up Zappa again, it's like, you know, if you package something and present it as music, it becomes music. That's how it works.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter what it is. If I fart and record it and release it, and I'm like, this is a single, it is now a song. You know, so it doesn't matter what it is. So, but, you know, obviously this isn't to that extreme. But for 1969 or whatever, I mean, this thing is pretty ahead of the curve, even if it never anticipated that it would be. It wasn't even trying to be. It was just like, let's make some fucking music. We don't know how to play. And you know who else did that? Beat Happening. So, you know, like they did, you know, they were better than this, obviously, and they knew chords, which I don't think anyone here knew. But
to quote,
you know, they're not like the most experienced. They're super amateurish, like super, you know, like the fundamentals is all they had. But they just knew how to write songs, and I feel like this album is
instruments and strum.
Yeah, this is like, but this, you know, this album is sort of like, yeah, you can make an album of music if you do that. I would appreciate if the songs were good though, but they're not here. They're not good songs. You know, it's not the worst album ever though. I mean, if this is the worst album ever, I feel like you're pretty fucking pedestrian, honestly. Like,
absolutely.
I don't think you've really heard anything. I feel like you should really expand your horizons, because, like, yeah, it is bad and it's kind of like a novelty album. This is far from like the worst thing that exists. Like, honestly, I feel like you just kind of got to get past that, and like, no, make no mistake about it. I get a headache listening to this, but like, you know, there's way worse shit. Like, this isn't like offensive or like dumb as fuck or like, you know, to me, a horrible worst album ever would be something. You know, they might be the best musicians ever, but like, it's just like basically a huge asshole is playing it, and it's kind of glorifying being an asshole. That's what I've always hated on the show, pretty much. That and shit that's just like
90% of what I've picked.
Basically, like, I'm trying to think of shit that I've hated.
You're trying not to name drop me, but It's coming.
It's like Chipmunks was fucking terrible, but that's
like
kind of
Chaz's
different.
album.
Like that's kind of
Things-
different. Honestly,
one of
that
the things
one's
you
not
hate is,
like that one. You know, I get why people like that one. I just fucking hate it. I don't think it's like the worst thing ever made. I really don't like it though. You know, the Meat Man's obviously in that vein where it's like it's just a bunch of like assholes who can play is kind of what it sounds like to me. What else have I just like? Seether's maybe the worst one. Honestly, like that's like the worst thing I could fucking imagine. Is like this is cliche as fuck. Like it doesn't matter if you know how to play, because clearly you don't know how to write songs or be interesting. And this is interesting. They made it on their own. I got a lot of respect for it, more respect than some of the albums I've heard for the show. And I dislike it quite a bit, but I don't even think I hate it. It's just really hard to listen to. I couldn't force myself to sit through it a bunch of times.
Well, you didn't like Trout Mask either, so that's not surprising.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of they're really different. I think Trout Mask and this record, but
I honestly don't think they're that different.
The same, they're way different. This one's not nearly as weird or avant-garde or out there. This is literally just a bunch of amateurs. Like the people in Trout Mask can play their instruments. The only reason they can play those complicated fucking rhythms and shit that they're playing is because they rehearse them religiously. This was rehearsed religiously too, but the difference is they didn't know how to play their instruments. They don't have Captain Beefheart being a fucking tyrant, and they're also not like absurd weird hippies. Basically, this is a totally different record in my mind. And these things came out the same year,
which is crazy.
So I don't know. I don't know. I guess my point is, this isn't the worst thing I've ever heard because there's admirable qualities about it. And it wasn't made by bad people, so really, who cares? That's kind of ultimately how I feel. Like you should hear it because it's kind of like an essential record in the music canon. And
it's only 31 minutes. It's a breeze.
Yeah.
It's an absolute
like as far
breeze.
as the quality being bad, I kind of don't care because like the story, like you said, Chaz, like the story and the energy around it and like kind of the musical
mythos,
cultural, like some of the biggest music icons have said about this
point
album,
to this record, yeah,
kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah,
but it doesn't mean it's good. It just means that it's really different and really important. Doesn't make it good. Whatever. Spiderland's important. Doesn't make it like amazing to me. Just because everyone it's similar. Even though I like that one, right? It's just this one's famous for a different reason. This is kind of a popular as opposed to a great record.
Does not deserve the hate, though.
But honestly, it's just as important to the music canon as like I don't know, like the fucking first Black Sabbath records, because it's just that important. Like people have cited it as being that important. People cite Black Sabbath as being that. So well, they're not Black Sabbath, by the way. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying in terms of cultural influence, maybe you could draw comparisons there. But I mean,
did you know
if
that
you don't think that's true,
with the Shaggs? Ozzy Osbourne played with the Shaggs.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm telling you, that's the thing about it. It just seems this. I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Gullible's written on the ceiling. Why don't you look up?
Oh, okay.
Fucking got him.
God damn it! I would have believed it. I would have totally believed it.
Of course you would have.
To quote,
I don't know.
To quote,
I guess honestly, now that I'm like 3 seconds removed from it, kind of know.
To quote the great Dean Ween, if you can play power chords, you're ready to start a band. And that is the mythos behind it.
They weren't ready, dude. They did not know how to play power chords. There's no chords.
Hey, no,
I swear to God.
There's some chugging along in a couple of songs. There's some chugging.
You step into their basement, right, and they're rehearsing. It's like, can you play me a G? I bet no one in that room could play G. If he had the money to fund an album, he was probably doing pretty well. Then again, this was the 60s, and tax laws weren't bullshit. Anyway, I'm going to give it like a light 4. It's really bad.
I'm going to go a decent 6. I love the lyrics across the board in this thing. They're childish, charming, funny, low-key kind of sad and introspective at times. And there's some songs in here that I do really kind of like. It's just that a lot more I just cannot stand. But it's 30 minutes. It's a breeze. The mythos and backstory behind it is incredible. It's a classic, and it definitely fits the theme.
Album itself. A little bad. It's a little bit bad.
But no, it does not deserve the hate it has received back then and can still receive today.
No, it's not the worst thing ever made.
Absolutely
honestly.
not.
Like, I mean, to me, it's not even close.
Decent 6.
This album is good as shit. I'm giving this a light 7. This is fun as hell. I would listen to this again. The Shaggs rock. The Shaggs are better than...
Clipping, technically.
No. Shaggs are better than...
Watch her walk back that.
Shaggs are better than Deep Purple. Shaggs are better than Deep Purple. 100%. 100%. Shaggs are better than Deep
I've
Purple.
seen your ratings of Deep Purple.
Conversation.
Bullshit. Absolute
What?
bullshit. I've seen your ratings of Deep Purple records. Bullshit.
You know, it's funny. We had
Deep
this.
Purple
We
is
had the
boring as fuck.
we had the Deep Purple conversation months ago, and I had never heard any Deep Purple, so I was like, "Okay, sweetie, whatever you say." Go crazy. It's like I don't know what's going on. You're just...
The album I've picked is the infamous album by faved punk band Bad Religion. All the context coming in. Get ready for a big old exposition dump on this one, boys and girls. Bad Religion formed in 1979 and hit the scenes in 1982 with their debut, How Could Hell Be Any Worse? A classic SoCal punk record. Right up there with...
It's
Which
not,
me,
I don't know
with
about it.
me and Brian actually listened to that record in preparation to do the album that we're talking
Classic.
about today.
Classic
just to get
song.
some context.
Classic.
It's really good. It's a great record.
Right up there with Black Flag, The Descendants, The Germs.
This is definitely less hardcore than those. I think it's a little more punk and less hardcore punk, in my opinion.
But
it's still that's a good record.
When it comes to
There
SoCal,
are guitar solos. If it tells you the difference between Bad Religion sound versus, Black Flag or whatever, Bad Religion on their debut had some interesting melodies. They had guitar solos, which is like a big no-no for some, aspects of the punk scene. So you could see that there's there's a piano on one of the tracks on the debut. So so there's a little bit more ambition. Not that unambitious 3-chord hardcore punk isn't fantastic on occasion, because it is. They're just working with a few more aspects.
Point is, I'm trying to put the viewers in the mindset. They were up and coming, huge following, got a lot of sales on their record, that more so than they thought they would get. Basically, Bad Religion's one of the big ones, one of the core punk artists you should listen to, because they have a decade-spanning career of tons of good material and great material. So when they dropped their debut, it sold surprisingly well, got them a lot of followers, and to them, that mindset that they had when they released their debut was that it was a fluke. So going to the next one, it was just not the right attitude that they should have had. And frontman Greg Graffin, I believe is how you pronounce that last name, or am I pronouncing that right?
You should have asked him. I don't know.
Let me call him up. We'll just call him Greg, frontman of Bad Religion.
Greg of Bad Religion.
Yeah. Started toying around with keyboards and synths. And they didn't really know what they wanted to do for their second release, so they just started writing music. And when they presented their demo to, I believe, the drummer and bassist at the time of the debut, they immediately quit the band in response. They quit the band in response to the music they had written. So
Bad Religion is definitely one of those bands that always had like a changing lineup, and this is just the first of many.
Yeah.
Like, this happened all the fucking time to them.
So going in, you think that this is going to be one of the worst things ever, because this album is notorious. It's notorious for punk fans, and it's notorious especially for Bad Religion fans, because Bad Religion themselves have basically disowned this album. They want nothing to do with it, haven't re-released it. The only other time they ever mentioned again was in a huge fucking compilation vinyl collection.
This is only because, like, of the backlash towards it,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the band thought of it. Like, the backlash was so fucking bad at the time.
Say that the band might consider, I'd say that it's quite possible that Greg Graffin considers this a mistake.
Pretty much.
Like, I don't know if the band themselves even like this record.
It's basically,
Yeah,
it's
they played it live once. Not once through a tour, one time. And never played it live again. Never, ever played it live again. So...
That's hilarious.
What?
Especially given 1983. They were a punk band. You know how many live shows they must have played before the release of this record for other older material?
Yeah.
Because that's how you got notoriety.
Mm-hmm.
Back in that day, the whole touring circuit.
What is this album?
They threw this away quickly.
What is this album? It's called Into the Unknown, and it's Bad Religion's
The
prog.
cover is like
Amazing.
space.
It's
It has
space.
nothing to do with the cover is literally like, and it's not like Earth. Like, this is like just like planets. Like, it's just unnamed planet.
It is Bad Religion's prog rock album.
Now that's a little misleading because it's also a new age or a new wave.
It's new wave.
It's very new wave.
Synth laden. Solos that sound like fucking cheesy 80s action films.
There are some songs on here that literally sound like what you would make if you heard Pink Floyd and then immediately went to make music. Like that's kind of the vibe. Like they're like, oh, we gotta make this like big and epic song. Like it's confusing.
So before we talk about this, that's the context that this album was doomed from the start, and its reaction was so legendarily hateful. It is the core pick for this theme because I think this album is actually pretty great for a couple of reasons.
Of course you fucking
Oh yeah, of course I do.
I heard it and I was like, yeah, Chad's gonna love this shit.
I think this album is as punk as it gets, and here's why. The one attitude of punk that I absolutely cannot stand is how hypocritical it is. We're against the man, being who you are, what you want to be. Like, who gives a fuck what other people think about you? That's punk. Except, but also, you have to sound a certain way, or you're not part of our group.
And dress a certain way, and act a certain way.
Hate that shit.
We're not conformists.
Now, obviously, Bad Religion didn't plan this, but I think in context, in retrospect, how punk is it to say, fuck you, we're going to make what we want and do an album of a genre that literally created punk? Like,
technically speaking, it is technically very punk rock.
Absolutely.
To do that.
Yeah.
Album is not punk rock. Like, even a little bit. Like, there's literally nothing on this. This is a different band. This is a different band.
Like, sounds nothing.
The Decision is punk rock. The album
is not.
It's not
even synth punk. It's not even synth punk.
Little bit of, no.
It's not even
like
synth
the closest. If
the
you'd allow me to
biggest
describe this record sonically before you get into it, because I have a big brain and I can describe things.
Wow.
This kind of sounds like a more lo-fi and cheesier version of the Cars, with the sort of more power pop-esque songs on the front half of the record, with these synth lines and the keyboards happening throughout, and these just very upbeat pop rock-esque guitar riffs. It's kind of like that mixed with a little bit of, say, Genesis.
Yeah.
A little bit of like Yes.
The
maybe.
synth solos. Oh,
very
the synths
heavy.
on here.
A lot of keyboard and synth soloing going on. A lot of guitar soloing. There's even some piano that shows up.
Acoustic guitar.
Drums, bass, and then the vocals. And to be frank, the instrumentation's not bad.
I think so too.
Like the performances, the actual melodies that are happening during these solos, the way that everything comes together sometimes and the piano comes crashing through, or a synth lead jumps in, actually feels pretty well made. Like,
I like how overblown it is. Like, when some of the synths and pianos come through, like that overstimulation of like, well, what the fuck is going on is pretty good.
It reminds me of Andrew WK. It really gives up some.
And honestly, if I had to sum this album up in like one word, I would say fucking corny.
Cheese! The cheese on this thing, it gives me so
this
much
thing
life.
Is like a 4-cheese grilled cheese.
Oh my god, it's
dipped in macaroni and cheese. Like, this shit is fucking, and like you wash it down with like liquid cheese. Like, it's fucking,
man.
Like lactose intolerant people would fucking die. Like, it's so much. It is the cheesiest. And you know what's funny is, like, you know, punk band's lyrical content is usually very political, very like angry, very socially charged. And so is this, actually, like, to an extent, except it's way more vague. It's not as good as like the first album, but it's way more vague. Now, that being said, there are some songs.
Lyrically, this album is great. I would dare say
gems on this. record,
for real.
It's not like this out. Like, the album cover is kind of a weird situation because there's
I just want to know
here
why.
It's about space or like sci-fi.
I thought this was gonna be like a story-based album. Like,
no, it's literally.
I know it's not. But if you look at it, you would have no fucking clue. I mean, look at it, like insert rock album here. Cover is space. It's about space. Like, you know, like.
Here's the thing. Lyrically, this album is very uplifting and motivational, which I like. But there are some environmentally charged songs on here.
I mean, like, the politics of the record, you know, are on point. At least up to snuff with, like, you know, what else is going on in the punk scene, or the first album.
But no, like, Time and Disregard, the 7-minute track with like movements and stuff. Very proggy.
That song is fucking awful.
No, it's not. Fuck you. It's one of the best on here. Oh.
Well, here's the thing. Time and Disregard.
But it's an
is not
environmentally
one of my
charged
favorites
song.
either.
It's an environmentally charged song.
I know.
It's
The
crazy.
thing is, there's definitely an imbalance in the quality of the songwriting here, because I think that the first 3 tracks, It's Only Over When, Chasing a Wild Goose, and Billy Gnosis, and then the closer, You Give Up, are the best songs on the record, and here's why.
Oh, no. Dichotomy, A Million Days, for sure.
What? No, these ones are the shorter, the catchier. They are fueled by energetic guitar riffs and cheesy but exciting piano and synth and keyboard. The vocal melodies on Chasing the Wild Goose and Billy Gnosis in particular are actually great vocal melodies. Like, those songs are genuinely catchy as hell. And that's where the biggest like Cars comparison comes in. There's maybe a little bit of like the Kinks in there that I got from the vocal melodies also. This is not a raw album by any means, but there's kind of a raw quality to the performances.
Well, the
in those
production
couple
on
of
here
tracks.
is low-key awful. I think the production on this album
Also,
is
Yeah.
bad.
The Wooden
it's bad.
Blocks by Davey Goldman. The drummer bangs 2 wooden blocks together on
That's
Chasing
awesome.
the Wild Goose.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's the fucking best part of the whole record. It's the best part of the whole record.
I disagree.
It just adds so much, like actually adds so much.
No, I agree with that, but Time and Disregard, The Dichotomy, and Million Days is my favorite part of the record. I think those songs are fantastic.
See, that is my least favorite easily. Like, I think it's such
Dichotomy
a
is
drop.
okay. I think there's some good moments in Dichotomy, but overall, it's.
I mean, Million
pretty
Days
weak.
is easily the catchiest song on here. And
Dude, holy shit. No. Oh, it's so bad.
It's
Okay.
awesome.
Here's the thing, Jazz. Here's the thing. I agree that the main chorus is kind of catchy, but it has my biggest problem with this record is anytime they bring out the la la la's and the na na na's and the whoa on this album, the vocals are real iffy.
Well, here's the thing.
Especially on
Well-
Million Days and Time and Disregard.
Well, keep in mind, so it's that attitude that they had coming into this one, that the success of the first one was a fluke. They had the wrong attitude because the production on this thing is its biggest kneecap, I think. Like, I like how loose this thing sounds, but there are some times where really, they should have done another take. Or they could have cleaned some things up a bit. Because the thing is, this album was the start of some stuff that would be in their other records. 3-part harmonies, the way his vocal inflections. That's like a Bad Religion staple, and that started on this album.
I do think some of the vocals here, though, are pretty weak, and especially on the tracks that you mentioned as your favorites. Anytime there's the like I said, anytime he's just vocalizing, it gets really painful.
Well, I think his
and the
vocals...
instrumentation below it isn't that bad, but I mean, listening to Million Days, again, specifically, the big extended vocalization passages that happen at the end of that record, or at the end of that song, are pretty bad. And I just don't think those 3 songs have the same level of energy and just punchiness as the first 3.
I think lyrically, though, they're
which has
strong
this
as hell.
Sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the songs I'm going to want to come back to.
It doesn't matter.
I can
if he's saying
appreciate that
good
they're
things.
not nothing vocal.
I will
lyrically,
say Billy Gnosis is the best song on here. Like, best song.
I would
Lyrically,
actually
that's
say Chasing the Wild Goose is the best song. I
Okay.
think that's the best one.
I just think, for me, yeah, the cheese is like what really brings me to loving this record. But I just love the attitude. I can only imagine what Bad Religion fans at the time, their first reaction, that first synth coming in at the beginning of the opening track,
I
amazing.
can understand it. I can totally understand the anger because I can understand the hate because
Well, hardcore punk and punk in general came out because of prog and just the overcomplicated bullshit up its own ass stuff. So here comes
Right,
the
and the
Ramones
thing
coming in with these simple power chords. So for this band to basically go against all that, I can understand. But if any other band had released this kind of music, it probably wouldn't have got as much hate. I think it's just because of like...
no.
No, I mean,
It would have been known as
king.
just a pretty decent and competent new wavy prog record.
Because I think it's actually...
I don't think it would have gotten a lot of love.
The
But
bandmates
it
were
wouldn't
pretty
be
young
the
when
way
this
it
came out, so for them to construct these melodies and songwriting, they were pretty fucking talented. Because there's some moments on here that are like, that's pretty awesome for just a couple like barely like in their 20s kids to make this. I
definitely think it's pretty bold to like shift sound so dramatically.
Yeah,
especially
for real.
One thing I don't get is I don't know like if they were surprised, why they were surprised. Because it's like, I mean, come on, dude. Like you can see yourself making your bed with this thing. Now it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It didn't help that this thing wasn't like amazing either, right? Like when it came out, like this is just like
I really think the production.
Decent.
I think cosmetically is what really
the production is either
awful.
Like it's one of two ways. Like either I don't know. I kind of feel two ways about it because like sometimes when it's overblown.
Well, I love how the guitars sound.
Clashes
I love the guitars
hard.
and drums. I love how they sound on this thing. But like, yeah, the vocals, June, you're talking about. There's times where they'll not sync up. It's just very loose, but in some great ways and wrong ways. I think that's the biggest problem here. I also have another problem. I think the pacing of it's a little rough. It's just a smidge of a slog, I think, sometimes. It sounds really samey sometimes, too. There's only so many times. Like, I feel like they reuse chord progressions a lot on here sometimes.
Honestly, I feel like I disagree with that. I feel like they did a really good job of making each song distinct and feel like its own thing. Like, I've never really lost it where I'm at on the record. It's just that some of the songs...
That's fair.
Kind of suck. I mean, like Million Days is a straight up like terrible Bad Religion song. That song, I think lyrically, like
I disagree.
Lyrically, Chaz, I think you're right. Like it's substantive, it's good, it's interesting, but oh my god, everything else about it. This is like the production is at its worst because there's really not a lot of like overblownness to compensate for the fact that the guitars on this song sound pretty fucking bad.
Yeah. Well, I think they sound great.
The chorus is like too cheesy. Like it's actually too fucking cheesy. Even if the sentiment is there. The dichotomy is kind of the same way. There's really not like the first 3 tracks, like yes, like the production is really
you can't hear any bass. That's my thing. Like there's no bass on this thing that can be heard.
And I think that's the result of getting a new bass. Like the bass lines don't pop at all.
Yeah.
Like, anywhere on the record.
The drumming though, I think is pretty great.
I think for the keyboards really make up for the fact that there's no bass. It's the piano and the keyboard. Like that's the percussion that's actually making a difference. But when those aren't there. Some of the like Million Days and Dichotomy, save for the last half of Dichotomy where there's that like kind of fucking awesome break into the guitar solo. And it's some really great instrumental change, but the rest of the song I could leave or take or leave. I don't really care. And the closer is like a return to form after a couple of bad songs, but it's really not the best either. I don't know. I think
if the whole album sounded like the first 3 tracks, it would have been even worse. I think
those
because they try
closest to like the original material, even if they're so far from it. And that's the thing. I'm not trying to typecast this band as one style because you can do whatever you want, right? But literally after this, they go back to a punk sound and release some of
it was
so greatest canonical punk music according to people who listen to music ever.
That's true.
So and it's like 3 albums in a row. Too.
Well, it begs the question of like why was the shift so massive? I really because Greg Graffin was messing around with the synth and was writing songs around it, but it's like where did the sound go? Like.
I think they just
I love this sound,
really
but it sounds nothing like
and wanted to do it. Like I think they genuinely wanted to do this shit. Regardless of if the first album did well or not. I think they wanted to go in this direction. But it was just the amount of backlash they received must have been so massive that they were like, wait, that many people are listening to us. They might have really taken it to heart. And maybe they think it's shit. Maybe it didn't age well for them either. And I mean it really I don't know.
But you should be proud of your history because this album has a cult. This album has a massive following. People love this thing. Like it is. Every YouTube comment I saw
how many
about
people are really like nowadays it doesn't really matter. Like obviously it's too they already went back to the punk sound, so there's really I don't think there's a point in like reminiscing on like
to not re-release it, it's like don't be a bitch.
I mean to re-release it they could and people would, but no one would like the problem with that vinyl, Chaz, is it's basically a collector's item. People want that original pressing because it's expensive and people like to own expensive things.
But there are people out there
the quality of the music. I
legitimately like the music. I think people
and they buy it on CD or something or like a bootleg. Like they're not I don't think anyone.
I just think it says a lot about you as an artist if you're not willing to embrace your flaws as well. Like, be proud of how you grew as an artist because I'm sure that was a big learning curve for them when they.
I guess for them, it's just that they went back to the punk sound and went on to do so well that they just have no fond memories of this thing. Maybe
That's fair.
I mean, I know I'm speculating on their thoughts towards their own album, but they pretty much gone on record to say, hey, go if you want to figure out why people hate it, go listen to it because it's bad.
But I don't think it deserves the hate. I really don't think it does.
It's overhated for sure. Like in terms of being over, like come on, like is this really the worst thing ever? Because Bad Religion made a different kind of sound and came out with an album that is like not as good quality as the one before it.
And the point is they made what they wanted to make. That's what matters the most. And that's punk. So for punk fans to be like, well, that doesn't sound like the music we like. So yeah, it's like, you're a bitch. You are the punk.
Well, here's the thing. I understand the hate because they went from making a great punk rock record to a pretty decent proggy new wave record. And so yeah, I would, like, if I was a Bad Religion fan at the time that this came out, would I be disappointed? Yeah, because I think it's a drop in quality.
I think honestly,
it's a bad record? I don't think it's a bad record. I think there's some really good songs on it. I think that they still have their instrumental chops. The energy's still there on a few songs.
I'll mention again, a lot of the things that they do in this album would be staples of them as musicians in other releases.
But it's still a drop in quality, a pretty significant
I think that's just cosmetically, though. I think that's cosmetically, though.
No, I disagree.
No,
I think songwriting is
I love the songwriting on this thing, legitimately. And the lyrics on this thing are great across the board. I think if the production on here was much, much, much better, because they literally have come out and said, yeah, we did not give a shit about the production on this thing. And it shows. It really fucking shows. And I think that's what really holds it back to being really good for me, like me loving this thing, because it just sounds so incompetently
underproduced.
It sounds so underproduced. I feel like a lot of the things could be much more punchy and stand out more.
That's not the only drop in quality. I kind of agree with where June was going with it. Like the songwriting it's not off a cliff, but it's not good. It's not nearly as good. And I'm talking about from multiple perspectives, because while I do love the overblown keyboards and the pianos at some points, and I think some of the songs are actually good, it's not like as good as the debut. It doesn't have as much potential as the debut.
But it's not trying to be the debut.
That's not what I'm saying.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not. Suffer is not trying to be the debut. It's another punk record. But it's just that the drop in quality across the board for the songwriting, lyrically, instrumentation-wise. I mean, there's some actual bad songs on here, and there's really not any bad songs on the debut, just songs that aren't as good as others. Mm-hmm. And even though their sound is very boilerplate, it's very just like punk music. It's not like, it doesn't blow. The debut doesn't blow my fucking mind. I just think it's some pretty good punk music. Mm-hmm. This is like mediocre new wave music. So it is a total drop in quality. And if I were to put myself in the shoes of the people who were there when this thing came out, I'd have been fucking laughing at this band if they dropped that. I'm like, what happened? You know, like why?
No, I agree. I just think the cheese is so tasty on this thing. It is so tasty.
It. Don't you ever say that.
Light fucking 8 on this thing. It's awesome.
Jesus Christ.
And it did not deserve the hate at all.
It's definitely overhated. Like, as far as the theme goes, yeah, it's overhated.
I'll say right now, every pick fits the theme perfectly. I'll say right now.
It's not even really like a bad album. It's just like mediocre. I mean, that's honestly, it just feels like a mediocre record.
It's like,
and that's fine. That's totally fine. It happened. Clearly, it didn't fucking matter. They went on to release, all the money makers right after this. But, it's overhated, but it doesn't. It's kind of how every album is. It's like, oh, this is way overhated. Why do people hate this so much? What, do you think it's good? Well, you hold your fucking horses. I did not say that.
I think it's good.
What would you give it?
Like a light 6. Like, it's okay.
I'm going to go with light 6 as well. I think me and Brian have pretty much the exact same opinion on this thing. There's some really good songs, but there's also some
Then there's everything else.
Yeah, it's not like
I totally disagree with your hate on that.
Except for when the na-na-nas happen.
The middle half of this record is like my favorite part.
Know.
That's crazy.
This is like the ultimate example for me of like the lyrics are good, but like basically nothing else is there half the time. So like not good songwriting, instrumentation is subpar. It's really cheesy, and that's like good and bad. I'm mostly mocking it for being cheesy, honestly. I don't really even like love the cheesy aspects.
I
just think it's funny
love the cheesy things.
And,
I really do.
I don't know. The prog song's fucking terrible. Both of the
off.
proggish songs are really fucking awful.
Big disagree on that one.
Just it's overhated, but it it's very lame. I guess it's kind of a lame record. I don't know. Don't really have any strong feelings about it.
It's lame, but it's likable. It's still likable.
Yeah,
it's still a likable record.
Like and the thing is, I guess I'm looking at the greater context too. Everything after this is a punk record, so I don't care.
I want to come back to Bad Religion and listen to the album they put out right after this one.
Well, we should do
because
Suffer for sure.
I know the album that came out right after, because the experience I've had with them listening to the debut in preparation to listen to this record and then listening to this record and being like, what in the world has occurred here? I would love to see where they go from here.
Hey, season 3, I'll use the sequels for Bad Religion.
I'd love to do
I'll use
Bad
the
Religion
sequels
again.
for Bad Religion. I love Bad Religion. They're one of my favorite punk bands.
My pick is 2011's collaborative effort from Metallica and Lou Reed, Lulu. This is the first Metallica record I have ever heard all the way through.
Wow, bad mistake. Big mistake.
It's
No
also
way.
technically, yeah, no, I've not heard.
Oh,
Master
I'm using the
Puppets,
sequels for
Rocket
Metallica.
Lightning,
Oh, I'm using the
Haven't
sequels for
heard-
Metallica.
Black Album. Haven't heard
What
any of
the
those all the way
fuck?
through. I've heard
Black
maybe
Album
one
is
song.
not the essential Metallica.
maybe-
I feel like
Yes,
I'm
it
just
is.
making it up
It's
popular.
essential.
It is absolutely a
Not nearly as
popular,
good.
It's a great record.
wide-selling,
It's not
widely
their-
enjoyed record.
It's not their best,
It
but it's a
doesn't
great
matter.
record.
I'm just talking about in terms of what people have heard, not what
Bad
June's
opinion,
heard, not what little June heard and is liking. Everyone
I got a
just
smart
about
brain.
everyone likes that record. All right, just about everyone likes that record.
It's a
You
great
like that
record.
record, I bet. You just don't think it's as good as the others.
It's not that great.
Fuck off.
Right.
It's great. It's great.
You don't
It's
like?
pretty-
Do you like? Okay, essential question. Do you like Enter Sandman?
It's fine.
Oh, I'd have banned you for worse. Okay.
Ugh.
So,
Boo.
yeah. Anyway, that's just funny.
Wow.
Oh my
well,
god, start over.
let me tell
can't
you-
just
It's not
go,
painting.
Brian,
it's not.
this is nothing. Absolutely nothing like the essential
No,
stuff.
I'm aware. I've heard, so I know like the song Master Puppets. I know Enter Sandman. Like I've heard some classic Metallica shit, and it's really good. But those are songs I heard as far back as like middle school. Like just because you hear them, it's such a
They're classics, yeah.
it's a ubiquitous band. I mean, everyone
Metallica's one of
listens.
those bands that's like, for the most part, are pretty dope. It's just when they're bad, they're really fucking
Well, it's-
bad.
so
That's the problem with
apparently they-
Metallica.
So something happened at some point. There was a tipping point, and then there was Saint Anger. And
By
then
far their
this-
worst.
and, you know, at this point, the band is pretty bad, and so they're just gonna release a collaborative effort with Lou Reed. And I've not
As you
heard
do.
Saint Anger or like any of the other bad
Don't.
stuff.
It's their worst. It is by far
So-
their absolute worst.
I don't have interest in hearing it, but I did have interest in hearing Lulu because it's quite a bit hated, and I had sampled the first 2 songs, and those songs are really good. They really have all the qualities I appreciate about music, which is like they're kind of kick-ass. I don't know what the song is about, and the vocalist sounds like no one else.
But Lou Reed.
And the instrumentals can get pretty intense here. There's even like some string sections towards the end of the album, but for the most part, it's just like some thrash riffs on some guitars that, as far as I can tell, have been EQ'd and nothing else. They literally sound like Guitar Center. Like this literally sounds like a demonstration video of a guitar being used most of the time. And then Lou Reed is kind of just
He's
really
vibing.
all over the place.
He's
This is
vibing.
basically, as of the time of this recording, this is the latest Metallica record and will be the last Lou Reed record because he is dead.
It's not the
Um,
latest Metallica record.
Oh
That's
no,
Hardwired
Hardwired
to
to Self-Destruct is after
Yeah.
that. That's right. Well, they don't release them that often, I guess. When was Hardwired to Self-Destruct released?
2016.
2016. Okay, so Lou Reed's last musical effort, and I feel like on this one he's kind of a lot of the times I think he's really talking about getting old. Is what it seems. That's the most I can really glean and like kind
Brian,
of.
I'm
aging.
gonna stop you right there. These lyrics don't mean shit. It's just improvisational, rambling
I don't
bullshit
think
from
that-
Lou Reed.
No, I think that's completely untrue.
Nah.
The little dog unproves your entire statement.
Yeah,
Little
but
dog, like where he's talking about this miserable little dog and like how it's like a pathetic little thing and how it's just gonna, it's worthless. Like it's this really.
But I'm going to stop you right there and say one
nihilistic
lyric
song.
that completely debunks your statement. I cut my tits off when I think of Boris Karloff.
Yeah, I can't explain that lyric.
A
Yeah.
different song. Okay, so
Yeah.
an album can have songs with meaning and songs with no meaning on the same record.
I
It
don't-
doesn't disprove the meaning of. I don't think Little Dog is particularly meaningful personally,
June.
but a lyric from Brandenburg Gate is not going to disprove that.
June, you're right, but I'm just going
I think
to
like
not agree with you because I can. Because you're right.
So
You're
let's-
totally right. But I'm going to disagree with you because I can.
because pseudoscience is the best.
The
Science.
best science
Pseudoscience
is
is best science. So let's talk about the first 2 songs. Which
Awesome.
Is,
Fucking awesome.
I would wager
Small
that's as far
Town
as
Girl,
most
I want on a
people make
t-shirt.
it.
I want Small Town Girl on a fucking t-shirt. Awesome
So like
shit.
it starts
not-
off.
It's
there's,
awesome.
There's
Small
like 20.
Town Girl.
Guys, James
It's
Hetfield.
not.
It doesn't even sound like him. I wouldn't know. I thought it was Lou Reed. I legitimately thought it was Lou Reed. I would not have known it was James Hetfield yet. So okay, so a lot of the times James Hetfield will handle the choruses, and this has mixed results. But the first two songs, I think they're awesome. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that like these are the most serious, like badass songs ever.
Oh, absolutely.
They are a little bit fucking ridiculous.
They're totally
But
ridiculous.
I don't know. I kind of admire how just indulgent it is, and just how, because for James Hetfield, is okay. Look, obviously it's a little hilarious, but I also kind of admire how
They go for
far
it.
it gets taken.
Absolutely go for it. There's no holding back on this. They came together and said, okay, are we doing this? All right, we're doing this. And they go 110% with this concept.
The first song,
of
Brandon
absolute
Burgate
bullshit.
has this. The chorus is like, I think it's awesome because he's like, you have James Hetfield in the background screaming in these completely like. It's literally just him singing. Like, it's not really modified. There's no effects on his voice, and
he goes full Springsteen on this thing.
And underneath of that, Lou Reed is still just rattling off like these really like Bish Bosh-esque.
Do you two know some of the backstory behind this album? Like,
I know a little bit.
Some of Lou Reed's performances
some of Lou Reed's lyrics
brought them to tears. Brought them to tears. But they also got into fist fights. They also got into fist fights.
Junior Dad is actually quite.
They got into
fist fight.
Lou Reed and James Hetfield fist fought in the parking lot during some of the recording sessions. Like, they got into. Like, the recording process alone is like worth a biopic. Just making this album, it is crazy of just the level of emotions going into this thing.
It's a very.
There is one problem, and it's my only issue with the whole album. Because I actually kind of like this thing a lot.
I have a few issues.
One issue.
One issue.
I have several.
One issue.
Damn.
Too fucking long. Oh my god. This thing is an hour and a half long. It is fucking atrociously.
I want you to know, I always, at some point, I would pause. I was like, I'm taking my Lulu break. Like, I'm taking my little my 30-minute lunch.
This thing.
That's your only problem?
My only problem is that it's too
I have
fucking long. But it's a big problem.
I have more problems than that. But I like this album.
But you know what's ironic? These are the only two. It's truly funny how we picked the worst examples of Lou Reed's material to do for this show, but both times have been it's too long. It's
and
just
it's also
so
it's
long.
awesome because we've never given him his flowers either. He's just like
Metal Machine music,
pretty bad.
Kind of good in some parts.
We haven't talked once about the Velvet Underground. Never about his great ones. Always the terrible.
Lulu, kind of dope, but too fucking long.
Okay, so let's talk about a few more of the actual problems.
Okay. I want to budge in. Let me budge in real quick because I only have to talk.
You are a skeleton. You have nothing to budge in with.
Her bones.
Ooh. I have thoughts. General overview. What we have here, Metallica playing some very bare bones riffs with typically not a lot of variation going on to kind of lay as the groundwork for Lou's
to just go all
pretty much
nuts.
just avant-garde poetry.
Just to go
it's
all
basically
out.
avant-garde, just surreal, dark, cryptic poetry. Some of it's actually pretty interesting. I don't think that Lou Reed is a negative aspect on this album. Some people cannot stand Lou Reed on this thing.
I think
can't
it's great.
stand his vocal delivery, can't stand the lyrics. I don't mind them personally.
I love it just because they go all out with it. There's no holding back on this thing. Like, they have this concept, like, all right, we're doing this collaboration, and they give it their all. Regardless of the outcome, they give it their all, which I give so much respect for, because this is ballsy as it fucking gets.
I think that some of the imagery is actually pretty interesting. Some of the songs, I think, pale in comparison to others lyrically. The number one example of that would be Cheat on Me.
Yeah, that one sucks.
Basically the same line repeated.
Yeah, that lyrically that one's
11 and a
not very
half minutes. The songwriting, the lyrics, nothing is interesting in that song enough to stretch it out for 11 and a half minutes.
It's too long.
I'm not usually one to I'm not usually one to complain. Actually, to be honest, though, the length is not my biggest issue with this. I'm not usually one to complain that much about length, but I do think that when you have an album like this, it's an hour and a half long and a lot of tracks.
Don't really change it up at all. It's just the same shit.
I'm sleeping.
Yeah, it's too long. Oh.
June's getting tired just talking about it, man. The album's wearing her out, and we haven't even fucking listened to it.
My favorite tracks would be the ones that have the best riffs. In my opinion, the
Dude,
ones that have
the last 2 minutes of fucking frustration are awesome. Oh, so good. So good.
Frustration's okay. Iced Honey, I think, as the shortest song on the record, or one of the shortest, is a really good track. I think the instrumental on that is actually pretty nice.
June, what's my favorite part of this album? What's my favorite part of this album, June?
The last half of Junior Dad.
Yes! Yes! So good! Oh, it's so beautiful.
Honestly,
it's so
I like Junior Dad. It's a really
beautiful.
good song. I literally never once went through the entire 10-minute other half of the song where it's just the string, because I was like, how long? I listened for about 5 minutes. I was like, how long does this go on? And I skipped ahead. It just does that it just rides that out.
I love it though.
To me, it wasn't like interesting or that pretty. So
it's honestly a beautiful
skipped it every time. I shaved 10 minutes off this record.
Dude,
I didn't really care about that part.
It's a beautiful ending. It's crazy that the same song that has Pumping Blood has that ending part. This album's a trip. It's a fucking trip.
Pumping Blood is one of the most intense songs on here. That song is maybe the most visceral and the most next to maybe frustration.
I love the strings on this thing. They really add a lot when they come in.
I like the guitar on Junior Dad. I like the melody of it. I think Lou Reed's vocals are very quiet and kind of contemplative and are much just more soothing than the entire rest of the album. A little less surreal, a little less aggressive. The last half of the track is fine. I think that it lets everything ride out very smoothly. I do think it's pretty much the best track on the record. It kind of almost hits an emotional appeal for me with Lou, talking very quietly. So I can kind of see why they cried in the middle of recording this.
My biggest problem is the length. It's just the length, because if this album was like an hour chipped off, this album was like 30 minutes, maybe 40-ish minutes. I would love it. Because it's
I want to go back to what you said a second ago about the Junior Dad. It was very adjacent to James Hetfield's father dying, and the lyrics were kind of about getting old, and like even though Junior Dad, the phrase is somehow linked to like a parent getting old or like something like that. Like that song seems very loosely about watching your parents get old. I don't know what the phrase Junior Dad means entirely, but it definitely I think is related to that. But that was kind of. It was very adjacent to a very horrible thing happening to old James. And that was his last parent as well, I mean? So it's not too surprising that it got him a little choked up, considering what it's about. Okay, so let's talk about the table in the room. The view. So this thing has maybe the most infamous Metallica lyric ever.
Yeah. I am the table!
This repeated line where it seems the song is like loosely related to like Christianity and the tablets like that the Old Testament was written on or some shit. Because he's like, the chorus is James Hetfield's going like, I am the root, I am the tablet, and then he says that, and this is the only one that gets repeated, is I am the table.
I am the table. Amazing.
This is very famous in wrestling videos, framed around screw ups or like botches in wrestling. And when someone lands on a table that's rigged to break and it doesn't break, you always get the I am the table segment, and that plays. And that was my first exposure to this album, was that meme. So, I'm like, okay, well, here's the original song. And to me, I think this is pretty much my favorite song on the record. Kind of for meme purposes, but also kind of like it is actually like a really intense, kick-ass song. Is that lyric really that ridiculous? Yes, is the answer. But, I think it has artistic merit. It's just funny because James Hetfield is screaming he's the table, and there's not a lot of context that really gets provided. Later, the table's referenced on, I think, Dragon, but I don't know if they're connected necessarily.
2 different tables, tables.
2 different tables. Well, the table on Dragon is like, you can't kick your feet up in me like I'm a table. So he's like, I'm useless. Like, you think I'm just like occupying space. But on the first one, it very much seems like he's like powerful. It's like a fucking strong table. Like, I don't know. You know, I don't
Goddamn
really...
hardwood table.
Or maybe he's likening himself to all these like inanimate objects that are just used as tools to communicate, you know, for other people. I don't know. It's a lot. There's a lot to pull apart, or maybe there's nothing to pull apart.
A lot of pull apart.
So let's talk about why, you know, let's talk about everyone hates this album, right? Metallica fans obviously hated it. Lou Reed fans probably don't even really like it because this is later Metallica fans. You know, fuck them. Fuck the regular fans, and fuck you if you like them. I don't care.
No.
Who cares?
Stop. No, you can't just insult fan bases for no reason.
I'm sorry. It's not. Look, I just think it. You know, I get why they don't. You have a total right to not like it, but like honestly, there's way worse out there. Like, come on, is this is the worst thing you've ever heard? I implore you to seek out the Meatmen. Like, I mean, the people who think this is the worst thing ever made, I would fucking shudder to see what they think of like the Grigori or whatever the fuck their name is. Like
the Garrick.
They must like. I just feel like it's, you know,
here's the thing.
It's just a little normie.
It's debunked
I think it's the worst thing ever.
Saint Anger is thousands times worse than this one. The drumming on Saint Anger alone warrants all the hate that Lulu got. It's fucking atrocious.
I just think people, I don't even know if people who hate it all that much have heard it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know if they would have listened to it. They probably were like, I'm the table. What the fuck is this?
It's just too long.
Even if you don't like it and you've heard it all the way through, I don't know, to say it's the worst thing. I feel like it's anyone who's going to seek this out, listen to it all the way through, and is someone who has like a musical repertoire, like has kind of been around the block musically. I don't know. I just don't really my brain can't compute how it's the worst. Even if I disliked every song on here, like sonically it's competent, you know, it's lyrically it's a lot. Like I don't know. It's pretty indulgent. I just feel very complicated because, you know, I guess I could see why someone could hate it. Out of all the albums we've done today, I feel like I could see why someone would hate this one the most.
But the hate that it got for all three albums, way too much. I really feel like it's way too much for Lulu. Like, what is this really the worst thing ever? Does it really tarnish a legacy or anything like that? Like, not really. Like, even if you just think it's a bad record, you know, this thing's really not doing any more damage than like fucking Saint Anger. Or whatever, you know, I don't know. I just really don't think it's that bad. I kind of feel like I'm not even connecting with the audience that doesn't like this thing so much because I'm just like, or hates it completely, right? Or it's the worst thing ever. I don't know how to speak to them or convert them or convince them there's way worse out there because I feel like it's not that bad. It's I don't know. Like I feel very strongly that it's not that bad. And the thing is, it's a late era metal album for Metallica as well. So there's a level of like experimentation on here that I kind of admire, even though it's not very good. Like, and that's I guess my biggest complaint is this is a one trick horse album. Like like it's literally the formula is Lou Reed waxing poetic over these riffs with this weird indulgent poetry, and James Hetfield coming in for some choruses with, you know, mixed results. I don't really get how it's the worst thing ever when it's like it's competent, like they can play, and like obviously there's a level of artistic license taken. I just don't think they take it far enough is my thing. You know, it's a late era Metallica album. I think it would be interesting or cool to see them do something different, kind of bounce back in a way that's like, oh, okay, they're really taking it. You know, they made all the best records in their discography at this point. To come through with like a late era essential one is going to be really difficult. And to pull it off with doing the same things they were doing before, I guarantee
I don't know if they'd be able to.
If they released this first before, if Saint Anger never happened, this album would have gotten the hate it did. I think everybody was just riding the hatred off of Saint Anger because that album was truly bad. Like
it could have been.
So
it could be.
They released this weird experimental. Everyone was like, just threw their hands up in frustration with Metallica without even giving the album a chance.
I don't know, June. What do you think? Do you like?
I think the album is flawed. I don't think it's like this great record that if people would just open their minds to go realize is amazing. I think that it has its merits. I think there are good things about it. There are some songs on here I like quite a bit. There's some energy to it. The riffs aren't bad. The Lou Reed's poetry is actually kind of interesting and only rarely gets on my nerves. I know a lot of people really, really hate the combination. I just kind of find it interesting. I don't think it's off-putting. It's weird, sure, but it's not like the worst thing. It seems like an overstatement to call it just so horrible and unfathomable. I do think that the songwriting could definitely use something, and I do agree with Chaz that it's too long. I just want more. Like, I feel like we have an interesting
Idea.
mission statement with this record, but we don't have it fully fleshed out to its potential. Even though it's an hour and a half long, I just wish that there was just more to this record, more interesting instrumentation, just songs that kind of take some turns and aren't just the same riff over and over. Just more ambitious songwriting in general. The songs are long, but they're not particularly ambitious, I suppose I should say.
Yeah.
I don't like Cheat on Me. I don't think it's an interesting track. Little Dog, I also don't really like either. Frustration has a cool back half, but the front half is not my favorite.
I kind of like the front half of Junior Dad more than the last half. I feel like the
Me too,
last
me
half
too.
is drawn out. I
The
get
last
where
half
they're
is
trying to
drawn
go.
out a bit too much. I don't love Junior Dad, but I do think it's a cool aesthetic, and I think that just the aesthetic of the first half of that track is actually pretty emotional.
I don't know. I kind of agree. I wish it were more ambitious. It is a little too long. Some of the songs kind of don't go over so well. I don't mind Cheat on Me. There's not really a song on here I mind all that much. Some of them are just a little mid-paced, a little boring, I guess. But I just meet the pure hate with this thing with like pure apathy. I just can't understand why you would like completely hate it. Like it's just, it's not the worst thing ever released. Like I feel like honestly, if you think it's the worst thing ever released, you need to like kind of get over yourself and hear something worse. Or you know, seek out. You know, there's worse than this.
Just listen to the
There's
bottom, man.
things far less enjoyable to probably their ears. I mean, if they don't like this, like I said, some shit we've done for the show, they would absolutely hate. They probably think Harsh Noise is pointless and terrible too. I just think the deep offense probably comes from it being a Metallica record.
I'm telling you, it's just because of how bad Saint Anger was that
I think even if
anything
this
they were
thing
going to
came out-
release couldn't have saved that.
Honestly, even if this came before Saint Anger, you know, I think it still would have gotten all the hate. And I think all the hate is literally just 'cause it's the same to the Bad Religion thing. It's because this is not the sound we expect from you, right? It's maybe just fan expectations getting in the way a little bit.
Yeah. I'm thinking a light 7 on Lulu. I liked it the most out of both of you. That's just because I'm pretty enthralled by the combination. I just think they go for it. There's no half-assing with this thing. I think the music is just a backdrop for Lou Reed's insanity. I feel like you can't have one without the other. Some genuine great musical moments in here that I really do enjoy. Back half of Junior Dad, amazing. Love that shit. And it's just too goddamn long. If this thing was just not long, it would be amazing. But it's long, so fuck it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
I give it a strong 5. It's a flawed record. It's a very flawed record, but there's stuff about it I like, and I don't think it deserves the hate.
I'm gonna go with like a strong 5 or a light 6. It's not the worst thing ever, but it doesn't mean it's really good either. It's just sort of decent. It's interesting. You know, I like those first 2 songs, but they're also less than 25% of the entire record. So I'm kind of good on this record. I don't really ever want to hear it again, but to say it's the worst thing ever, like a lot of the other, honestly, every pick here that we've done today, I'll probably never listen to again, right? But to say they're overhated or to say that they're the worst things ever is kind of just proves what we set out to do. I feel like it is, you know,
this was an interesting experiment.
They're really not that bad.
I feel like with Underrated, we just got lucky. Me and Brian were talking about this a little bit before the show. With Underrated, we could have had an experience just like this one. I think we all just got really lucky with our picks because even though I wasn't huge on Father John Misty, that album had a lot to bring to the table, and we all loved Embracism and Pictures of Starving Children. With this one, I feel like was more how this didn't go at all how I thought it would. I liked every album.
It's like, are these albums bad? Yeah. The worst ever? No. And that's kind of what, you know, but I think that conversation's worth having too. And the reasons why they're maybe so hated is true too. Even if I came in and fucking hated everything we listened to get into the reasons why we hate them is maybe more interesting. Having sought them out and heard them, because, you know, the consensus on these albums has already been made.
I think overall this was more positive than we thought it would be, which was good. Speaking of good, what are we doing next time, June?
Talk to us, June.
Next time,
we have a guest.
It's a regular episode.
Ooh, we have a guest.
You're gonna spoil the surprise. We have a guest in
You're welcome.
Velocities and Music's own Tom Hummer, who we mentioned Velocities Music. It's a podcast. It's a couple guys who have reviewed a shit ton of records, made a shit ton of podcasts.
They have some good
Something I
taste.
used to watch back in the day. They got some good taste.
But
Chaz reached out to Tom Hummer, one of the two. Want to be on the podcast? Tom agreed, and so crossover time.
Yeah. He will be doing... What the fuck is he doing, James?
Long Season by Fishmans.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese neo-psychedelic Zoomer classic by Fishmans.
very retroactive classic in people's minds.
I am going with the wonderful, ecstatic, energetic, catchy, Can't Stand the Rosillos by the Rosillos. Released in 1978, some super upbeat and melodic punk. Very excited to talk about this one.
We're going to do Janet Jackson's first solo success record, as there are two before this that are total flops. But this is the one there where she kind of separated from her father, kind of went out on her own ventures, and kind of invented or pioneered a new genre a little bit in the 2000s with the, this is the late 90s, I believe. But late 90s with her record Control, which is a genre we haven't really talked about
This came out
yet.
in 86.
Oh, fuck, really? I thought it was 97.
Yes.
All right, run it back.
No.
Watch this shit. Take two.
How do
Ready?
you listen to this and think it came out in the 90s?
Ready? Take
So
two. Take two.
80s.
That's funny. You're right. I'm thinking of her later
It's
stuff.
super, super 80s.
I was thinking of the Velvet Rope, which is 90s, which I was wrong. It's not 90s.
Fake
Anyway, here we
fan.
go. Anyway,
This is
cut-
like straight up like.
yeah, this is 80s. I know.
Don't say it.
So I'm gonna do just cut all that.
Ah, shit.
We're gonna do Janet Jackson's
And it's in.
solo successful first. We're gonna do Janet Jackson's.
Over and over again.
Hey, hold on. Chaz, you gotta cut all this out. We're gonna do Janet Jackson's first successful solo record from 1986, Control. It's kind of separated from her family a little bit. The Jackson family fired her father, Joe Jackson, as her manager, and went off on her own venture, and it ended up being very successful commercially. A lot of hit songs on here from the 80s, and kind of, I guess, would be the early glimpses of New Jack Swing that, as far as I'm aware, Janet is kind of introducing this sound. Is kind of mixing these elements of R&B and soul music, but also with these like pop sensibilities. I don't know. It's an interesting fusion. It doesn't sound like anything crazy, but I guess for the time it was really new. And I just have this like lack of understanding of the genre, to be honest. But it has that quality about it too. So I feel like I need to mention it.
I never learn from my mistakes, but I think this will be the biggest risk I ever take for this show. And I think it will go over very well. I hope.
Christ.
I could be wrong.
We've heard this like 5 times before.
And 3 times out of 10 goes over well. We are doing I don't know what this is. I think it's a compilation album. No idea what order it is. There's not a lot known about this band. I just found this on my many excavations through Rim. The album Tummy by the band Wat Tyler. British punk band, I think. But that is not at all even come close to labeling what's on this record.
Talk about the cover.
It's 43 tracks. Now, we'll talk about the cover in the episode. But the cover is what floored me from the get-go. 43 tracks, compilation album, maybe a studio album. Who fucking knows? Some covers on this thing, some originals. There's a lot to take in with this one, and I'm super, super fucking excited. This will be my biggest risk, and me saying that now is a lot, but I think this is going to go over well. So, all I care about is if Tom likes it. If Tom doesn't like it, then, I quit the fucking show.
Damn, you're going to have to quit the show. You're really going to ride on that, huh?
I'm like exhausted just hearing you explain what it is. Like, you're just such a fucking animal.
Go in with an open mind. Always go in with an
Dude.
open mind.
I'm done with you. Dude, just fucking get us out. Just do just say whatever.
Brian, if
Just
you
get
come in
whatever's
liking
gonna-
it, I'm literally going to record this part and play it in the review of you being a bitch. And
You have to start the show with it if I like it.
If I like it.
You have to open the show with the quote, and then we'll talk about yours first.
This has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. I'm June Lindberg. I was here with Brian Courtney
Goodbye.
and Chaz Jenkins.
Bye, good.
We'll see you next time. Jesus Christ.